Look at the picture behind harpist Marcia Dickstein, please, and her gorgeous home. I have no doubt. Ringling Brothers, an authentic poster from the 1940s. That's how come this interview is going to be so exciting. I'm having a wonderful chat with the co-founder of the WC Trio. We're talking this beautiful combination harp. That's Marcia. Uh,
Yes.
uh, Angela Wygand, who is the flutist, as we're going to talk. It could have been clarinet, it could have been tuba, who knows? We'll figure out how come this combination of colors really gorgeous. And then what do we have? Walter, help, I've got it here. David Walter, thank you. Violist. You know, it could have been a cellist. And I do believe I'm staring right back at the person who made that decision. Can you tell me how did you come upon this idea of these three instruments? They are gorgeous together, and called it Debussy Trio. I'm sure there's a quick little story there. And
Yeah.
give us all the story of the Debussy Trio, Los Angeles based. Go.
Well, it started. Angela and I were at USC together. 19, we actually started the trio in 1988, so this is our 30th season together. Um, and it really came down to a professional decision at that point. You know, we were kids, and um, I wanted to be a harpist. But you know, you look out in the world of choices, and at that time, it was really about playing in an orchestra. Going into the studio business really never even crossed my mind. It wasn't something that I
Hmm.
major passion to do. I thought I was going to be an orchestral harpist. I really loved opera. I played in the LA Opera Orchestra for a long time. I love opera. And Angela has since she's been in the LA Opera
Yeah.
Orchestra for almost 30 years, I think. So it came down. So what do you do to have a career and to have a rich life? And so I was looking at the repertoire that existed for chamber music with harp. My mother, was a professional violinist, was good friends with Michael Tree, who was the violist of the Guarneri String Quartet.
Wow.
And he would come over. I had professional musicians in my house as a child all the time.
I hate you.
Really, literally, genuinely, we had Piatigorsky and Heifetz and
Ah,
um, Brooks Smith for chamber music at my house when I was a child. So chamber music has always been important to me. And so I looked at the repertoire and I thought, well, we have the Debussy dances, which is string quartet and harp. And you have the introduction to Allegro. And these groups are too big, they're cumbersome, and they're expensive to book. So the other piece that's just the that is, I mean, our repertoire was so limited at that time, was the Debussy Sonata for flute, viola, and harp. And that seemed like a really great place to start. And I immediately, because I was in school, started doing research, and I found about 25, 30 pieces of music for that combination.
wow.
Most of it not great music. And Angela and I were good friends, and I said, well, let's change that. And we immediately started asking friends to write for us. So I mean, it's, you know, I look back and I was just at a harp conference this summer. We played at the American Harp Society conference, and I said, you know, I had people coming up to us and thanking us for what we have done for the repertoire, for especially for harp, but all three instruments. But we have now commissioned about 150 pieces of music. We've probably had an equal amount written for us that were not commissioned. When we started the trio in 1988, we were the only professional group of that instrumentation in the world, and now there are, I would say, at least a dozen full-time flute, viola, and harp groups. And when I mean full-time, they're doing, you know, they're out there commissioning and they're playing all over the world. And we started the same year. We started a publishing company because one of the things that I wanted was to make sure that all the music we commissioned was available for other people. So
I
we
said,
set.
just not to worry. I would be
Yeah.
putting that link up so
Oh,
people can buy the music as well as the CD and so on. That's my role is to make sure everybody has access, totally, musicians and otherwise. So,
well, me
excuse me.
too. But I see so much music now that is being commissioned, and you can't find it. You know, you have to know that either the composer wrote the
Stuff like
piece.
that. Yeah.
It's very difficult. So I wanted to have a one-stop shopping place for flute, viola, and harp, and then we've expanded it to other new music because I have so many composer friends that just can't get their stuff out there, and I'm like, oh, you know, I publish whatever you need. So. Um, I make absolutely no money at this. This is a love. This is a project. This is a passion project. Um, for our lives, and I think it's made my life richer.
By the way,
Um,
tell us all about making no money. By the way, the Ringling Brothers sign behind you could not be more appropriate, as I heard you just tell us very clearly that you are in fact an entrepreneur. But the irony, of course, is you could be an entrepreneur in business is supposed to make some bucks. And entrepreneurs in the arts, we maybe kind of sort of break even, but we do, at least in our minds, wonderful good deeds. I know we do good deeds. We do good
yeah.
things for people, for musicians, for everybody. So.
Well, I think life is. I mean, I'm fortunate because it turns out that I do make a living in the studios. I've been
Yeah.
very very lucky. So I've been playing. I think this is my 27th year in the studios, and I am grateful. I cannot begin to tell you to make a living and have an opportunity to make a living behind my instrument,
Yeah.
and that you know, and I've certain funds or whatever to being an artist on the side, as it turns out, and because chamber music pays as a performer less and less. The publishing business never paid a dime,
That's right.
but it makes I think you have to. I think you have to contribute to the world somehow. That's selfless and not to be completely altruistic about it. It makes like I said, I play music I love. I get to hang out with great artists. I get to play music with my friends.
And
Um,
you touched on something I was going to ask you about, which I find so fascinating. It now finally brings us full circle, everybody. We're here to talk about a new CD by Debussy Trio, uh, Angles of Angelus. Now, how cool is that, by the way? Five of LA's, four living and
mhm.
very contemporary, wonderful composers. By the way, that this CD, Angles of Angelus, I'll put it up on the performingartsreview.net website and the link to buy it and everything else. It's like, I hope you won't be offended, but I find it, because it can be misinterpreted, but I find it just the most delicious bonbon. Beautifully wonderful contemporary music, 21st century vibe that is still extremely accessible and very tuneful and charming, and as per our discussion so far about how there's something almost mesmerizing about the combined color of these three instruments, harp, viola in particular, and flute. It's just such a mellow sound. So but all five composers, one of them died in 1968, we're going to talk about him, but people forget that Los Angeles became a giant center to which so many of the great European composers came to escape Nazism.
Right.
And we'll talk about these, and then of course the living composers in this brilliant city. I'm in Santa Barbara, but I dip my toe in once in a while into that great, gorgeous megalopolis of Los Angeles. So anyway, so the CD is Angles of Angeles, Debussy Trio. I'm trying to figure out where we were. Do you want to go ahead? Should we talk a little bit about? I mean, we talked about the origins of the trio, and I'm going to ask you a little later on about what might be coming up in the future. But you're kind of the keyboard of the ensemble in a way. Am I all wet on throwing out that allusion?
No, I don't think so at all. I mean it's appropriate. I cover both the voices. I'm the I'm the rhythm a lot of times. I'm the heart and the driving force, literally musically, behind a lot of things. My goal as a harpist has been to bring the harp into to a different perception because I look at people. So many people go. They're so fascinated by the beauty of the instrument. I'm like, it's great, it's beautiful, it's lovely. I may be the best harpist you know or the worst harpist you know, but I want to challenge you and I want to show you what this instrument is capable of doing that's not just pretty background music. So, although I think that a lot of the music that we perform is not the most difficult, um, it's not, you know, kind of
Esoteric?
yeah, it's not totally
Good.
intellectual. I mean, just over the top. I mean, a lot of our audiences are people that are frightened by Copeland. And I mean, we play in not just Los Angeles, we play actually perform very little as a trio in Los Angeles.
Oh,
We perform all over the world where where Debussy is considered new music.
yeah.
And so I have to, it's our job to tell you, and I say to my audiences a lot, I appreciate that you like Gone with the Wind. You go home and watch it every weekend. And it's a great movie, but you have to move beyond that. And there is so much great music, and let me bring you into my world. So the composers that we commission and the people that are on this CD are, like you say, they're living, they're clearly 21st century.
And they're making a living in Hollywood for the most
Yeah.
part. They're
Oh, some of them yes, some of them no.
film and
Um,
TV music that all of us would recognize. Some of these
yeah,
composers have composed it. You might mention when we get there. I'm trying to look at my writing here, and it's too much. But yeah. Excuse me. Go ahead. I was going
well,
to actually say, if I may, just for a second. Um, I've had a real epiphany in the past year of listening to so much music, so many CDs coming at me, and this whole Gunther Schuller third path or third way, the mixing of jazz and contemporary art music and all of that, and then also just film music. It's glorious stuff. So
yeah.
I was going to say, there's no everything on this CD is gorgeous and accessible and charming and interesting and rhythmic and fun. I think for the most part, and there's no one needs to make any apologies for it. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? It's a beautiful CD for people.
I think it is. I mean, it's music that I like to listen to. Every once in a while, I hear things on the radio when I'm driving, and I'm like, oh, that's a nice piece. I'm like, oh, that's me.
That's nice.
It's kind of fun. I like I say, it's a pleasure to be able to support my friends in their artistic pursuits. This happens to be a CD of all male composers.
Uh-oh.
That's I commission lots of women, but that's in this particular case. I was, Lucas Richmond is a conductor. He's now with the Bangor Maine Symphony, and
Amazing.
he's a massive composer, all genres, orchestral, and Paul Gibson actually has a day job with the LA Philharmonic. Um, but he's big, particularly in writing religious texts and writing for the
Yeah.
Catholic Church, and tons of choral music and vocal music. David Walter obviously is the violist in the trio, and he's making his living as a violist in the studios. And Jack Redford, a lot of people don't realize this. Jack is, you hear his music all the time, but he's a kind of a ghost writer. He's an orchestrator.
Uh-huh.
So he orchestrated for years for James Horner. And his,
Say,
you
let me
hear,
jump in about Jack because his name alone caught my attention because it has come up before in some other CDs by local, LA composers that have asked him to write pieces for them. Amazing
yeah,
stuff. Jack Redford, just I've got it here underlined a little bit. Let's see here. Writing multiple seasons of music for Coach, that everybody is for Saint Elsewhere.
yeah,
Trip to Bountiful,
yeah.
the Newsies, the Mighty Ducks 2 and 3, and it's sort of this that's kind of was the gist maybe of a question I haven't quite asked yet. But these people make tons and tons of money. I mean, can I say that without being too exaggerating too much? But they make a lot of money writing for these films. Who would ever guess that the composer of the wonderful music, I'm sure, for Ducks 2 and Ducks 3, which I haven't seen, I'm sorry, it's undoubtedly gorgeous music, would also hanker to write. Hanker, thank you. Hunker is different, isn't it? Would hanker to write a little something, a little chamber piece for trio. That's what fascinates me about Hollywood composers.
Yeah, well, it's what's interesting is a lot of the guys that I'm friends with are, they're not, they're the orchestrators. They're the people that are a little bit more behind the scenes. You might not recognize they didn't
Uh,
get the A-list movie this year, but they are unbelievably talented. Don Davis, who has written a lot of music for us, wrote, all the Matrix movies. But now he's writing operas, and he's writing. I mean, a lot of people when we're kids, we all want to be artists. But then you grow up and you have to make a living, and it's not that you want to bring your art into the movie business. And a
and
lot of
you
us,
do. Yeah.
yeah, a lot of people, a lot of composers get the opportunity,
Yeah.
but a lot of composers in Hollywood are doing a job. And the director or the producer says, I need you to I want a score that sounds just like Joe Schmoes did in this film. And so they have to regurgitate, and it's not as satisfying artistically. So this is their opportunity to stretch out and be pure artists.
And it's maybe that it's a loaded question because my friend since high school is Bruce Babcock. whom you
Yeah.
commissioned to write a trio one time, and Bruce has survived the whole Hollywood film and television scene, and he still is somehow one of the most gorgeous, wonderful human beings I know. But he has told me over and over again for 30, 40 years just how tough and rough and rugged the business is. So I congratulate all of you. And by the way, the pressure, just even as a performing musician, come into the recording studio, you got to play everything. First take is it.
Yeah.
People the public in general doesn't realize that. So no wonder there are these great musicians in California, Southern California in particular. And I wanted to ask this kind of question. And we'll get back to the CD in a minute. But something about, is there any difference in your experience between East Coast, West Coast? I know I'm in trouble already, but some people say, "Oh, East Coast musicians are far more serious and far more dedicated." Blah 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 blah. And yet I see in Los Angeles, people sit down, they play it, they go home. They do it the exact same thing. So it's nonsense, right?
I think so. I mean, there's an old thing, an old whatever. I think it's Mishigas, as they say in Yiddish. But that if you are born in this town, you have to go to Europe, you have to go to
Yeah.
New York, and then you come back, and then you come back a hero. But if you come and you stay here, then you're just Joe, and we all kind of do our jobs, and I think we get underrated to a certain extent because a lot of us went to local schools. We went to
Yeah.
USC. We went to now the Colburn School that exists, and it's not nearly as glamorous. But the rest of it is BS. I think. I mean, the musicians in this town. When I sit down and I listen to what these orchestras that I play in are capable of, it's really staggering. And what I think people don't understand about the music business in Los Angeles is how quickly we have to regurgitate. So whereas in the European orchestras or maybe a more serious New York orchestra, they have rehearsal time and they have the luxury of time. And I mean, I'm walking in and now with tight budgets and stuff with a movie, whereas we used to work when I started in the business, we would get an 8-day movie call. Now we're putting it down in 3,
Ah.
and we may be doing, and I will walk in. And now a lot of times even they reduce the budgets by having the harp record separately and being put on top of the orchestra. So now I have to go in, and an orchestra's been recording for 3 days, and I have to put it down in 4 hours. So it gets tighter and tighter. And there's lots of reasons why they separate it out because of the technical capacity and what they want in mixes and sound effects and all that kind of stuff. So the entire personality of movie music has changed, but budgets have changed. And my colleagues, I cannot begin to tell you how unbelievably focused and dedicated and wonderful and consistent they are. And also the fact that you can have somebody that wants a jazz score on Monday, and then John Williams on Tuesday, and then Trisha Yearwood record on Wednesday, and then and then the Hollywood Bowl on Thursday and Friday. I mean, it's just staggering. So if you're one of the few lucky people, and there's couple hundred that have that kind of a career, it's phenomenally um, it's unbelievably varied, but demanding and stressful.
Very,
And
very stressful and demanding. Yeah, have to be totally scheduled at all times.
yeah,
Uh, you know, uh, and it's a wonderful living. You
it
know,
is.
so
Yeah,
I
it
want to
is.
talk about the fifth composer on your Angles of Angelus
Yeah,
CD, and maybe you'll give us the little story. I know you know. I want you to tell us. This is the Italian composer Mario Castelnuovo Tedesco,
yeah,
who escaped Nazism, World War II, came to Los Angeles, and like so many others, Corn Gold, and the list goes on and on. And remember, Stravinsky was here for a while, as you know. I mean, everybody. Hindemith, I think, lived in Los Angeles for a bit. Maybe I'm wrong there, but the point is, it must have been amazing in the
yeah.
40s and 30s and 40s and 50s. Anyway, Castelnuovo Tedesco died in 1968, but you uh, like this guy's music. Tell me about the chase and the achievement that is on Angles of Angelus.
Well, it's a great story, and I promise I'll try to keep it short. There are so many connections to him. My mother was actually friends with him, and he was at our house again when I was a child. I didn't know that. I actually learned that after we put out the CD because she hadn't told me, just presumed I knew. But when I was at USC, I was doing tons of research, and Tedesco wrote a harp concerto, a concertina, and he also wrote a couple of it. He wrote a cello and harp sonata. And I was constantly doing, I would play these pieces and I would find note questions or mistakes, and I was always in touch with the composer or whoever. Well, I got in touch with at that time his son, who was a doctor in Nashville, and he and I took up a correspondence back and forth about whatever we were talking about at the time. And because we became friends, he sent me the manuscript for this piece in 1992. And I put it in my library and didn't do anything with it because its penmanship was not awesome. It was very difficult to read. And anyway, it wasn't my priority. So I just put it aside. And David and I were looking through, and he goes, "Hey, you have that manuscript. Why don't we take a look at it?" And I pulled it out because we wanted to add it, just a little something to the CD. And we played through it, and it was so beautiful.
Beautiful.
And I
Wow.
just couldn't believe it. So, and then there's another. It turns out his grandson is a friend, an old friend of mine, a mom, a kid mom friend.
Amazing. A small world.
Yeah. So
Amazing.
I emailed him and I said, I got this score from your uncle, and I'd like to record it. What do you think? And he put me in touch with his cousin, who is now the head of the Castelnuovo Tedesco
Ah,
Foundation. And because I had had a correspondence with her father, this doctor, back to 1992, and I have a letter from him, they gave me permission to record it.
that's
And
nice.
it goes back a long time to when I was in college doing my good deed work. And they gave me permission. It's never been performed before. I have the manuscript. I don't think she was even aware of it. That anybody else had it. And so I'm really excited. It's not published yet. I'm hoping that they will publish it. She would not allow
Wow.
me to publish it, but she did allow me to record it. So I'm pretty
Has she
thrilled.
heard it yet?
Oh
Probably.
yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah. They're very pleased.
Okay, good.
So,
I hope so. It's
yeah, it's all
gorgeous. And it's the what is it called? The Persian Prince from
yes.
Postcards. Is that like a series of pieces,
It's
postcards?
greeting cards. I think is what yes, and I think he wrote 52 of them,
For
and
different
they were
instrumentation or what?
all different. This is the only one. A lot of them for guitar because he wrote a ton for
Ton of
guitar.
it.
But he would write them as birthday presents or thank you presents for friends and things like that. So they don't really know that we know who it was dedicated to, but they're not sure who he was, the dedicatee, or why he wrote this piece. But I think it was the next to last one that he wrote before he died, if not the last piece.
Yeah, 67 or something. I think I read somewhere,
Yeah,
and he died in 68. Well,
yeah.
listen, let's wind it down. I've had a great talk. We've had a wonderful chat with harpist Marcia Dickstein. Did I get it right? I think I
You
did.
did.
Co-founder of the WC Trio, along with Angela Wigand, and a few years later, the brilliant, by the way, what a gorgeous sound, as everybody says, the brilliant violist David Walther. The three of you have really, broken new ground with all kinds of commissions and new works for this combination of harp, flute, and viola. Such a beautiful, gorgeous, mellow sound. The CD, WC Trio's latest CD, it's called Angles of Angeles, and you can't miss it because it's a wonderful picture, as you'll see when I put the review up and this interview up at performingartsreview.net. The kind of those twisted freeway exits and on ramps and off ramps that I remember since before I was even born. But it's just so LA.
Yeah.
Four living Los Angeles composers for beautiful, wonderful, fascinating, interesting, very pleasing, pleasant, and accessible pieces, and then the Tedesco world premiere as well of his piece that had been sitting in a cupboard for several years. So it's quite a CD. It's been a great pleasure talking with you. It's only been 30 years, I think. I mean, you've popped up in the LA Times and in my life for you know how that is.
Yeah.
You read about somebody and then finally 80 years later you meet. So it's been a thrill, Marcia.
Thank you
Thanks.
so much.
Thanks for giving me some time.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, we're done.